G'day expats. Today I'm just doing a short video on what a covered expatriate is and why Australian expats need to be careful when they obtain a green card, especially when they return back to Australia, and whether they'll have to pay any exit tax. Now, in the eyes of the IRS, a lawful permanent resident is someone that holds a green card or that status or US citizenship, so a passport. Now, the other item to be aware of is whether you're considered a long-term tax resident. Now, a long-term tax resident is someone that has held that lawful permanent resident status for 8 out of the last 15 calendar years. And be mindful that it's not for a full calendar year, it's in a calendar year. And that's important when you look at your exit. So those are the initial tests to look at when we consider whether we could become a covered expatriate. The next tests that we look at are 3, and we only have to satisfy 1. The first test is, do we have or have we had an annual tax liability of roughly $160,000 to the IRS in the previous 5 years? Now that's indexed as well, so 5 years ago that would be less, technically. Now, if we do, it means we're satisfying that test, and it means it's highly likely that we'll become a covered expatriate, and we could trigger that exit tax. The second test, if we do not satisfy that first test, is our net worth. If we have a total net worth of $2 million US or more, then yes, we are certifying that test, and therefore we could become a covered expatriate. The last test, which is a test that a lot of people fall over, is being able to certify Form 8854, which is essentially saying that you're up to date and you've been compliant with the IRS's tax requirements for the previous 5 years. A lot of people trip over this form because they're unsure of what to do. But obviously this is in regards to lodging our tax returns, our FBARs, and making sure that nothing is overdue. Now, if we unfortunately satisfy one of those tests, it means that we are likely to become a covered expatriate. Now, a covered expatriate is someone that is going to essentially have to pay some sort of exit tax to the IRS. Firstly, a lot of exemptions and thresholds are factored into this kind of calculation because it is essentially a deemed disposal calculation that takes place on our worldwide assets. Could be a property back in Sydney, could be a 401k, could be shares that are vested to us through our US employer, or even an investment property that we might hold in the US. Worldwide assets get factored into it, including our superannuation as well, which not a lot of people are aware of. On the date in which we give back that green card, the day before, that's the date in which the IRS will treat us as selling all those assets on paper, as it's a deemed disposal event. If there's a relevant capital gain made on those assets, factoring in the exemption thresholds, we will have to pay a final tax to the IRS. So it's important to be aware of whether we've held that green card for a period of 8 calendar years, in 8 calendar years I should say, out of the last 15, as well as whether we're going to satisfy any of those tests. Now, if you've been overseas in the US on an L1 visa, or an E3 visa, or even another visa such as a J1, holding those visas does not count towards this test. You need to be considered a lawful permanent resident, which is that green card status, or that US citizenship. So it's important to plan and prepare as we approach that time period in which we could satisfy that minimum test, the long-term tax residency test. Sometimes it might be worth coming back earlier from the US so we don't trigger that exit tax event. Appreciate your time and thank you for stopping by.